Hi, my name is CJ and this is my RC channel. On with the build. Okay, so I think we can go ahead and throw the motor plate on. That looks like these 3s or 4s. These look like 3s. They're 3s. And you know what? I'm going to replace as much stuff with stainless as I can while I'm going through here. I mean, I have the hardware, so why not? Now, this would not be a place that I would use aluminum. Whereas, okay, I've got some stainless hardware here and some aluminum. I've got some titanium hardware on order. I'm still waiting on that. Probably not going to use any aluminum on here, but we'll see how it goes. So, our motor is going to go on right here. And let's see how deep those are. Let's do this. So I can probably go with 3 of these. Okay, those are going to be a little shy, or just not close enough, so. Now, I'm not tightening them yet. I want to get all 3 in. You always want to remember that. Otherwise, you just make work for yourself. So then you got to undo them again, loosen them up so you can get the next piece in. Cool. Okay, let me just check the photos for a second. So it looks like we have 1 and 2. So the first and the third, we're going to pass through to these, I'm assuming. Let's see if that height works out. Yeah, that's the height. Okay, so we got 2 of those, which means that we want something long enough to pass through this threaded bar. Let me just compare these. Okay, and we want something that's going to pass through here and be long enough to have some at least 4 or 5 millimeters so that this can thread down onto it. So we need 2 long ones. And then the other 2 can be pretty short. They could even be very short because they're not load bearing. So there's no need to use really long hardware for the other 2 locations. Let's see if these pass through. Yeah. See, it's not a lot, but all we're doing, this is just a battery stop. So the 2 long ones, on the other hand, yeah, see, that's going to leave enough for these to screw down on top of them. Might even be able to go down a size. Anytime I can make these shorter is going to be less. No, that's too short. You see that? That's not enough. Because these are going to be structural, so we want them to be sturdy. So I'm going to use 2 of these short little guys, because those are just anchor bolts, and then 2 of the longer ones. So let's start with the forwardmost one, and I'm going to put the Loctite further down. So I'll tighten those firmly in a moment. So a little bit of Loctite about halfway down. Again, not going to completely tighten. Snug them once they're all started. I'll tighten them down. So these little suckers are just adding a little strength. Okay, so what's going on here is these are a stop for the battery in this direction, and they also are a place for the battery straps to go underneath. So yeah, they're about the same. Make sure those are tight. Okay. So now, as you can see, those are going to anchor there, and our steering rack here. And they've given us a couple of holes here to be able to mount the receiver box if we wanted to, the stock receiver box, which I'm not going to do. I want to keep everything as low as possible, and I'm just fine with it being on top of the servo like before. That worked great. So, next question is, do I want to start anchoring this down now, or do I want to wait till I get a little further along? I think I'll wait. Okay, these are my 2 servo mounts. It's going to go here and here. These are battery posts, and they've got these slots that allow us to move the battery and use batteries of different sizes. I'm probably going to try running shorty packs initially. And, you know, you don't even necessarily need 2 of them. You know, this is closer to center than this one is, so just using a pair of them might be enough, because you're just keeping the battery from going forward and backward, and the 2 rails keep it from going anywhere. So, in fact, these rails, this outer rail could even be cut down to size, but it's so light. I mean, it's aluminum. This weighs nothing. I mean, it really is just super light. So I'm going to use very short screws for these. If I had aluminum M3 countersunks, I would use them, but I don't. So I'm going to go ahead and use 4 short little M3 countersunks, because those come through just enough, because all we're doing is stopping a battery from getting away. So that's plenty strong. I mean, it's like 3 millimeters worth of thread, and considering what it's doing, I'm not concerned. So there we go. These I will use one size up from the smallest I've got. That's still going to leave plenty of thread. I wish they'd put like a little bit of a hex fitting on there or something, just, you know, ground 2 flat spots so you can grab it with a wrench. But I'll just use a little, well, I don't want to use too much Loctite because I need to be able to move these. Now, I am just kind of arbitrarily placing those for the moment because they will need to get positioned more appropriately. See, as you can see, one of them is going to be fine. The battery isn't going to be able to come offline and go anywhere. I don't see a reason to use 2 of them. If I were designing this thing, I would have just done one dead center. That's enough. I mean, it's a, you know, 1/4-inch diameter aluminum post bolted to the chassis. It's not going anywhere. So, servo. I am going to replace this servo with something else, but for right now, it's what I've got. I'm going to use it. Let's see. Now, don't want to go that short because I want to put a washer on there. So, I need 4 of these. Those 3 are the same. This one's... Okay. Next question is, will these washers fit? And before I put on Loctite, I'm going to test this. I want to make sure this is going to line up on the chassis. Perfect. Okay, I don't need to worry about that. Let's go ahead and Loctite this sucker down. When you get too much Loctite on one bolt, just take that bolt and touch it to the other one, and the threads will just wick the Loctite right over. I like that they've got this elevated. I'll show you what I mean in just a second. I've had a few little tuning issues where I was having a hard time getting as much left turn as right turn, or you know, getting full lock. And I wanted to use a slightly longer servo arm, but you're limited by the design of the Traxxas nose area. You can't put anything bigger on there. So if you notice, this is our pan. The servo's elevated by at least 5 to 7 millimeters. So that's going to mean that I can put a longer servo arm on here potentially. Not by much, it looks like. I could use a couple standoffs underneath it and jack it up a little more. And I probably will do that because I really want more throw. I really don't like being limited like that, so... I don't know why they do that, but whatever. That's just a linkage. I'll figure that out later. I'm going to get some standoffs. In this case, they're really just large washers or spacers. I am thinking 4 millimeters. I'm going to go big. So just for conversation's sake, let's place them over here and see what we're getting. So that is, you know, raising the center of gravity, but this isn't a crawler. And yeah, that's going to work just fine because that arm is going to be flipped. So I'm going to be able to run a longer control arm for sure, by at least 2 to 3 millimeters. So, okay, so what do I need for this? These are going to need to be the longer ones. That's weird. Like somehow I got a button head in one of these when I was sorting everything out. Oops. That's not it. That is the problem with these little boxes. It can be hard to get to stuff. Okay, that. Nope, it's that size. Okay. So let's finish anchoring this servo. It's a nice kit. It's not the highest quality machine work. It's probably done over in China. Keeps the cost down. Most hobby stuff comes out of China these days anyway, so it's hard to complain. So let's just check these and make sure that we can't go shorter on those screws. Okay. So that's a lot. In fact, that may not even be enough room there. So. Last one is always the hardest to get. Okay. So with the 4 millimeter spacer, you got plenty. That's going to be just fine. Yeah, I'm not worried about that. It's going to be a little hard to set this up, but it'll be easy enough. Just don't tighten things down. Got to leave these a little loose so you can get the spacer in on the next one, because it's going to want to get away from you. So let's get our Loctite on first. That's way too much. I don't like having to lift it that far up, but if it does what I want it to do, I guess I'll live with it. I guess what I'll do is I'll put on the longer arm and I'll see how that works and operates. And if I can shorten this up again, in other words, if with the arm on there, I can bring this down like another millimeter or two, I've got spacers down to the 0.5 millimeter. So I can definitely bring the servo closer, and you know, you do want to lower the center of gravity. There's no doubt that every bit of that helps. So I don't think that lowering it by a millimeter would make a huge difference, but we'll see. Anyway, bingo. So not going to worry about that this minute. This is definitely facing the wrong way, though. And the wrong direction. Okay, so let's look at servo arms. I know I got one in here somewhere. And I'm headbutting the camera again. Here we go. And this one may not work at all. Okay, this one has 3 possible locations, but because of that extra length, it may be too long. I might have to cut it, and I don't want to do that. So I'll have to go with a different control arm. I do have other metal ones. So let's start by getting this out of the pack and seeing what we can do with it. Is it too long or not? That's kind of a pain. Interesting. You know what I'm going to do? Yeah. Well, let me think. Let's start by seeing if this fits. Yeah. Okay, I could knock off a couple millimeters right now. Let's make this a precise piece of work here. Spacers. So if I can slide a 2 millimeter spacer underneath that horn, that means I can take out the 4 millimeter spacers and put in 2 millimeter spacers. So, and a 2 millimeter spacer fits under there with room to spare. Not a lot. Let's see what a 2.5 does. So if I can fit a 2.5 in here, that means I could put 1.5s underneath here. And a 2.5 fits underneath there, but I mean just. But just is good enough when it comes to this kind of thing. So that means I can go with 1.5 millimeter spacers, and that means I'm bringing this down from 4 to 1.5, so that's 2.5 millimeters that I'm getting rid of, of height of this. Since I was worried about the center of gravity. And that also means that since I'm going to be lowering it, that I can use a shorter screw than the ones I was using. Maybe. I may just want to go ahead and keep that extra thread length. And looking at it, I think I will. I'll keep the extra thread length. See, the nice thing is that since I've already put Loctite on here, I really don't need to do it again because the Loctite is still on the threads on the bolts, and it's also inside the aluminum mounts. So if I add more Loctite, I'm really doubling up the Loctite. So they are still gonna anchor in just fine. Okay, so I'm gonna use the same screws. I can put the 4mm spacers away. Thank you very much. Pull out 4 of the 1.5s. I'm just thinking about this. It's like, maybe I should just go with the 2s. Yeah, I don't want to run a risk of that thing rubbing. It was like 0.5 millimeter away from clearance. I'd rather be safer than sorry. So, 2 millimeters. Okay, so this is going to be even harder now. I guess the best way to do it is going to be to set these up like this. Get them all started just a little bit. Okay. I'm jumping ahead of myself. Okay, before I can do that, I need to get this anchored and on, which means I need to recenter the servo. Always center your servos. Always. Anytime you fiddle with the servo, anytime you disconnect anything, anytime you take the horn or the servo arm off of the servo, recenter it. Well, it's easy. All you do is, you know, throw it from one side to the other, and then when it's all the way to one end, hit the center button, and that way it tracks straight to center, and you're done. Now, not all servos are lined up perfectly. You know, the splines might be off a little bit, and you've got to compensate for that in sub-trim. So what you want to do is find the direction for the splines where it's closest to vertical, and that's this. So that little bit of, you know, like 3 degrees, maybe 2.5 degrees, I can compensate for that in sub-trim. Now, sub-trim is different than trim. So that doesn't affect your normal trim setting. That just gives you a, you know, lock it to center. So let's get the provided screws out here. Okay. So we have 2 of these to clamp this down, and then we have a new screw, and I think I'm going to go ahead and use the one they provide. The threads on this look a little tired. It's also a Phillips head, and I'd rather use an Allen wrench. May need to put a washer in there. This is a pretty long screw, but maybe not. Okay. And now these guys really lock it down. So which side are the threads? Okay, this one goes from this side, and then this one goes from this side. And these should just be M2s. Yep. Okay, beautiful. So now I can start getting this together. What I should do is loosen one side here to make sure that these go in without strain. Okay, solid. Okay, now you should be able to see, I can hold this right for you, the amount of space that we have underneath here. So that's going to work out just fine. It's nice that they grind that plate down for us, give us a bit of clearance. So now we need to choose a bolt to anchor this on here. And a stainless button head should do the job. Got a pretty big eyelet here to pass through. Yeah, I wanted something a little longer than that. That should do the size. Okay. So, yeah, that's too long. That's going to be pretty good. I think it'll be okay. I don't think I have an option. Let's just definitely put some Loctite on there. Oh, son of a bitch. Okay. See, I had everything perfect, and then we got this nasty big eyelet here where the screw's going to bottom out right like that. Well, that stinks. Okay. Okay, I see an alternate way of doing this. I can put the servo on the back side here, and then I can, yeah, that's going to work. Okay. So, back apart. And this is the nature of doing custom vehicles, because this is a completely custom vehicle. You know, I'm taking something that's barely a kit and taking what was a ready to run chassis. Yeah, can I reach these? Yeah. Okay, good. I can just get in there. When I got the Slash, it was a roller, if you recall. In other words, it was a ready-built chassis. All it needed was electronics, shock absorbers, wheels and tires, and a body, which sounds like a lot, but it's really not. All the diffs were built, the suspension was all assembled. So, and I have even another idea about how I can do this. I can flip these mounts 180 degrees. If I don't like this setup. Okay, that's not going to work because of those. So, here's what I'll do instead. Leave that screw in there so I don't lose the spacer. Okay, so now I'm going to, instead of having them face this way, I'm going to face them this way. I mean, aside from whether it drives well or not, one of the tests of whether this aluminum chassis is worth the dollars is when I get to attaching suspension, and does all of that go together properly. Okay, so there we go. That's going to put us right where we need to be, I think. Yeah. Okay, perfect. So let me look at the photographs. I wonder if they have it set up like that, or if they have it the other way. Yeah, they did have them flipped like that. I should have looked before mounting them. Okay. So I'm going to put a little extra Loctite on here again, just because this is such a vital point of failure. Okay. So, nope. Damn it. Okay, what I've got now is the big old plastic yoke here is touching down on the edge. So I'm going to need to go back to a longer spacer. I'm probably going to have to go all the way back to the 4s. And, you know, again, if this seems like a nightmare to you, don't go into it. You know, this kind of building where you're, you know, franking-carring stuff together, if that doesn't seem like fun to you to experiment and try and tinker, don't get into it in the first place, because you're going to end up doing a lot of it. It's just part of the game. And you gotta like doing it. You gotta like figuring out problems. I mean, this really is a tinkerer's hobby. Most of the old guys who, you know, did this forever, a lot of them were engineers or in one STEM field or another. A lot of the guys at our club who are older retired guys are former engineers of one variety or another. I certainly am. Of course, I did a lot of different stuff. It wasn't just a single, like, mechanical or something like that. I did software engineering. I did mechanical engineering. I designed ruggedized components for the military, Navy in particular. That was some of the best work. It didn't pay much or as much, but it was rewarding in that I was building stuff all the time, and you know, you feel like you left a mark somewhere in the world. So if you're young and you're trying to figure out a career path and you enjoy this hobby, go into engineering. You know, learn the math, figure it out, get a tutor. If it, you know, you're not going to do math all day long as an engineer. There's a lot more to it, but you got to get through that math so you can, you know, get your degree. So struggle, fight it, get it. You know, like I said, get a tutor if you need to, and make it happen for yourself, because it is a very rewarding career. And you know, you may not make the most money. Who cares? You know, realistically, if you set up a savings plan and you manage your money well, you don't get yourself living paycheck to paycheck, you know, invest in a decent home, things like that. Don't buy a new car every 2 years, and you know, stupid stuff like that. You can set yourself up very nicely. But, you know, having a job where at the end of your life you look back and you go, yeah, I made that, I did that, you know, that's really rewarding. So there we go. Take a look. If I swing the, let's see if I've got this in the camera view for you. Okay, as the servo swings over, it clears that edge just fine. It's about maybe a millimeter, maybe 3/4 of a millimeter away, but it's perfect. So, and also this longer arm works great because this linkage here is almost completely horizontal. If you look through here, it's almost parallel to the chassis. So we've got a good, you know, good geometry in our linkages. Very nice, very nice. So, and if I look at this centered, these two are right about where they should be centered. and the servo is just about vertical. So yeah, I think I'll make an adjustment to this. I'm going to shorten up this linkage a little bit. As long as I'm in here this deep and I got my fingers in here, if you notice, okay, right now I've got the servo perpendicular, straight up and down. Okay? You see? Servo straight up and down. These two are off this direction. So to bring them to center, I need to shorten this linkage. So I'm going to try doing one rotation and see what that gets me. And instead of undoing the one that's Loctited, I'm going to go through the bottom here for the one that's in plastic. And use that nice access port that they gave us, which is good thinking on their part. Definitely. Also, the bottom one, unlike this one, I see this one I've got to do a full 360 turn. The bottom one here, I can do 180-degree turns because I can just, move the screw. So let's see, we need to tighten. It's hard to see the direction of the threads. I think we're going this way. Let's try one full turn. It may take more than that, but we'll start with one. Okay, before I tighten that down tight, let's see what our geometry is looking like now. Okay, get the servo straight up and down. Still needs to come over a little more. Let's try another full turn. Okay, again, before tightening, let's check where we're at here. Okay, that's straight up and down. And that still needs to come over a little more. Let's do one more turn. See, by getting this precise, I'm going to be maximizing the amount of throw I can get out of the servo because, as it cuts an arc, the more it starts moving up instead of left and right as it rotates, you're losing throw, and so to get the most out of the servo, you need the servo to be centered, and you need the linkage it's attached to be centered. Otherwise, you'll have more steering to one side or the other. And you want equal amounts of steering to both sides, so that you turn as tight a turn to the right as you can turn to the left, but you also don't want to not have enough turning radius to either side because you've had to give some of that up, because you don't have your linkages straight. Okay, so the servo's straight up and down, and the steering is right on. Okay, see, now that's a huge difference. So 3 full turns, and I mean, the difference would have been like 3 degrees worth of steering, and that's a lot to give up. And it would have been, like I'm saying, it would have been asymmetrical. It would have been one side and not the other. So one side would turn sharper and the other side wouldn't turn quite as sharp. And you don't want that. Definitely want to correct for that if possible. So these were 2mm spacers. So let me put those back in their box now before I lose track of that. And these things are cheap. You can get them in sets of, they'll come in like 3 sizes. As you can see, I've got 1s, 2s, and 3s, 1s, 0.5, 1, and 2, 0.5, 1, and 2, 4, 6, and 8, and then just some random stuff here. And then I've got 0.5s, 1.5s, 2.5. So that gives me a lot of room to play around if you're like adjusting ball joint heights and things like that, trying to get things properly aligned. For example, if I was a super stickler for this and I wanted to make sure this was totally perpendicular, I could put a 1 millimeter or a 1.5 millimeter spacer in between this arm and the connecting rod that goes from the servo to the arm. And I should never have mentioned that, because now I want to do it. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna put a 1.5 in there. Does it even need a 1.5? I think that's too much. I think a 1 is gonna do it. Okay, let me just show you what I'm talking about. If you look through here, okay, and what you're looking to see is this arm here that connects the servo to the steering linkage. Look at this arm in relationship to the aluminum chassis, and you'll see that it's higher on this side here. Okay, it tilts downward. And when you're working with steering geometry, you really want straight connecting lines. So I'm going to go ahead and put a spacer in between there, just because I can't resist. And as long as I'm at this, I'm going to check this bolt size and maybe swap it for a stainless bolt. Especially if I have one that's a couple millimeters longer. And I do. Excellent. And it is. And that goes in the pile over there. Okay. Gotta love it. So, spacer. And as long as I'm doing this, you know that I'm going to check and make sure that that is long enough. I don't need to go with the 1.5 or the 2. And it's not quite level, so I'm going to swap a 1.5 in here. Like I said, I had so many little suspension issues with steering at first, and ended up taking that thing apart more than once. Let's just jump to a 2 and test. Oh, that's perfect. That's beautiful. You see? Hopefully I can hold that at an angle where you can get a look in there. There. Perfection. So I just need to tighten that down, and having that extra screw made all the difference. That longer screw, because that ended up going with the longer spacer. So there we go. Perfect. So now I have a geometrically precise set of steering connections there. Everything is perpendicular, everything is square, and this stuff is straight up the way it's supposed to be. Perfect left to right. So happiness. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please click like and please subscribe to my channel.